All right, welcome everybody to Nukes of Hazard. I'm Sarah. This is Mike. We're joined.
And I'm Suzanne, and this is Rom.
All right, thanks for joining us today. Really critical episode talking about the latest.
It's the
Big one.
the big nuclear regulatory conference, and it was attended by our good friend Rob, and he also attended another conference in Austin, where you're from. I guess have we talked that you are in Austin?
Yeah, we're in Austin. We've been here for 7 years. We were in Charleston before that, where all nukes go through and yearn to move back to.
Yeah.
So, Rob, you've got some pretty big recaps to share with us today. A lot of new trends, a lot of things to be on the lookout for in the nuclear space. So, where do you want to start?
Yeah, I think I'll start with I was at two conferences that week, last week. It was the second week of March, and one was called the Texas Nuclear Alliance. It was a one-day conference as part of South by Southwest. It was up on a beautiful rooftop bar. We all got sunburnt. That's a little foreshadowing for later. And then I went straight over to DC for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission Regulatory Information Conference, which is their annual conference where it's free to the public. And they rent out a big Marriott, and there was easily 1,000 people there.
Did any
of
of your fans show up, Rob?
I walked around alone most of the time, so yeah, no, but I did actually. I ran into a bunch of old colleagues from my GE days.
There you go.
And some old submarine folks that Mike, you were kind enough to introduce me to. No sans. But yeah, it's the NRC puts this on in order to invite the public into like everything they're doing. So it was 3 days packed. I mean, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And they even had an AI symposium the second half of the last day, which I'll touch on as well.
Wow. So, Rob, lots to unpack there. Where do we start? Do you want to start with some of the trends in advanced reactors?
Yeah, maybe we'll do that. We'll just talk about advanced nuclear reactors because both these conferences covered it. And then I'll give you just one or two nuggets from the Texas Nuclear Alliance, and then we'll talk about the RIC. Everyone calls it the RIC. But the big trends around advanced nuclear reactors are how can we get them approved, licensed faster? So the average time these days for a new nuclear project just to get approved is about 5 years. The ADVANCE Act, which is bipartisan under Biden's administration, says it's got to be 2 years. So then you go from 5 to 2 years. So there was a lot of discussion about how to do that. There was a lot of discussion about financing. How are we going to pay for all these things? So public and private funds.
Let me slow down real quick on the licensing from 5 to 2 years on what kind of licenses, or were they specific kinds of licenses?
Oh, yeah.
Discussing?
Yeah, there's actually a variety of licenses you can get. There's a construction license, there's an operating license. Those are the two main ones. There's one called a manufacturing license, which has only been given out once. That was many, many years ago. I don't think it was even used. But for those two, the construction and operating licenses, you have to submit a lot of paperwork. The two big ones are the environmental report. How will your reactor impact the environment? And the other one is called the Site Safety Analysis Report. So that is a lot more specific about the technology you're using. How will that, assume it breaks, will the site be safe? So those are the two big components, and it takes about 5 years for each.
And so on what end is it being shortened? Is it being shortened on the end of the sort of bureaucracy looking at it, and they are restricted to only looking at it for 2 years, or how does?
Yeah. You from the time you submit it, you actually email it in. They have the NRC has 2 years. to say yes or no. And there's touch points along the way. There's it's not just send it and wait. They can have formal or informal follow-ups. In fact, one of the nuggets that I'll share right now is for the advanced reactors, most of them are brand new startups. So no experience, not no experience, but little experience with the regulator. And they don't always know how to go about it. So one of the suggestions is start having informal conversations early, and give the NRC your plan. Here's what we're going to submit. And then the NRC even set up like a whole section of their website, which is like a how-to guide for advanced reactors. Another big thing that came up was they shed some light on the reduced rates for advanced reactors. So like when you and I, apply, like our kids apply to a college, it's, I don't know what it is, $150 to apply. Well, if you submit a license to the NRC, you pay them by the hour for how long they review your reactor. And it's anywhere from $225 an hour up to like $300. The Advanced Act says for advanced reactors, that is cut in half. So that's 50% off. So that should help on the capital side for the advanced reactors.
Is well, we use the adjective advanced. Is advanced mean a design that hasn't been approved before? Does it mean a non-pressurized water reactor? Does it mean what defines advanced for the viewer?
We should talk about that. So an advanced reactor is most of those things. So it's like an umbrella term that describes the newer technology.
It's a catch-all for all of the new things. It's not the AW, or what was the big ones in carry the 1000 AW1000 or the whatever, like the
right. So all the reactors that run in the United States today are light water reactors, the ones that generate electricity for the grid and go to your house.
Yeah.
And light water reactor just means that there's a lot of water going through them at high pressure, and the water has some chemicals in it, but it's primarily water. And so there's like 95 operating reactors in the United States. There's 50 different designs among those 95 reactors, but they're pretty much all the same, and that's how the NRC is organized. They're organized to review those types of technology, and they're good at it. They've been doing it for 50 years. But the advanced reactors have completely different technologies, and we heard about them a little bit from Steve Long 2 episodes ago. They're not using pressurized water to run through the reactor. They might be using molten fluoride, so just high temperature fluoride. They might be using other substances that are not pressurized. So, and the fuel might not be in fuel rods, which is how all operating reactors have fuel rods that go up and down. Some of these advanced reactors, the fuel's just scattered on the bottom of the reactor bed like a kiddie pool in little pebbles, and the coolant runs over them, over those little pebbles. So anyway, I'm not doing great justice to it because there's actually so many different types of reactors that are being proposed.
Yeah.
And the problem is they're just also different to what we have today.
So that actually brings up the question in my mind of if they're already have taken 5 years to prove these things, and now they're more than cut in half the time to look at them, and there's so many different kinds, and they're very different from what they're used to. I mean, how does the general public have confidence in what's being passed through?
Well, there's this guy developing this like machine learning tool that's gonna review the documents and make it real.
Yeah. Yeah.
This plug.
Nuclear AI, baby. Yeah. So that is actually where the NRC is between a rock and a hard place right now, because uh, they are feeling pressure to do that. So, I mean,
They feel pressure to approve, but they've got to cut their time
Yeah.
more than in half.
and sort of given aside here, the NRC is very interesting to me in that they are the regulator, yet they are they kind of intermix with the industry. Everyone's colleagues, everyone's friendly. It doesn't feel like they're the cops. I think it's a tough balance. um, but truly, in order to get it all done, they're going to need some advanced technology, and they're going to need some new procedures as well. And there's a host of ideas out there for it.
So we're talking a bit about the approved license and getting it through faster. That's your first bullet, but then the second bullet, I want to make sure that we spend some time on that. The public-private funding. Like what does that look like, and could that maybe help if there's more funding or different types of funding? Could that maybe help with this approval process?
Yeah, I think it can. So the funding thing is, okay, reactors are expensive. So like, the Vogel plants, I don't know the final number, $5 to $10 billion. These are the Westinghouse AP1000 reactors that were built in Georgia, finished a few years ago. Each one is a gigawatt. Costs a lot of money to build. China is building anywhere from 7 to 12 of those right now. And the government is funding it. In the United States, we don't have that kind of like government capital, but the thinking around that is changing. So if you're looking at a bottleneck, what's going to prevent us from building these things? Money is one of them. So there's only so much private capital for that sort of thing. The banks, traditional banks, I don't think they really like the advanced reactors because they're smaller. They're intended for different use cases than what's already been built. So, for example, they're meant for like supporting data centers or manufacturing or like really remote operations. We don't have nuclear for that right now. All our nuclear plants just go to the grid. So anyway, if you're like I don't know, Morgan Stanley or something like that, and they're like, hey, can you give us $2.5 billion? They're like, well, our risk profile is such that we want to know that it's already been built and it will be able to be built again. So there's a limit to private capital. But what I mentioned, the thinking is changing around that. The Department of Energy, so the NRC is kind of under the Department of Energy. Late last year, they announced $900 million in grants. Global Laser Enrichment got part of that. I think it was that program. 800 million was to build 2 advanced reactors, and then 100 million was set aside for other things: supply chain, workforce development, tooling, like AI type tooling. And then I actually read in the news this week that one of the plants just received 50 million on a loan. It might have been outside of that program. But basically, like, the government has a lot more money, and nuclear energy security is is an important goal. So I think the gears are turning there. I don't have as much insight into it.
Well, plus we've heard that private entities, hyperscalers, are now throwing money at new nuclear construction. The Microsoft giving Constellation the money to open 3 Mile Island. Amazon and Meta have all pledged lots of money for nuclear startup stuff.
Yeah.
And so yeah, but
I mean, so on that note, unless you had a follow up there.
no, yeah, that was back to you.
So talking about money, and then I'll talk about two other bottlenecks that were addressed at this conference. So, uh, at the same time that the NRC conference was happening, there was another energy conference in Houston. I think it was called CERA, CERA. I don't know the acronym, but at that conference, it was announced that a bunch of companies came together and said, we're signing an agreement to support tripling nuclear capacity by 2050. So in the next, 25 years, tripling what we have right now. I mean, I think before that was like a couple of governments signed on to that, but now you had private enterprise doing it as well. And then the NVIDIA CEO at his mega conference this week said at his keynote, we're not limited by semiconductor production anymore. The world is power limited. So that's NVIDIA talking. So you're starting to see these like really big companies say, we really, really, really need nuclear and we're gonna put some money behind it.
And so with
Wow, that's
with,
pretty strong phase. Sorry, Susanna.
that's I'm wondering, was that predicted before ChatGPT was introduced? Would that have even been predicted that we would be energy limited in the kind of way that we are now?
So I'll tell you about this question. So Susanna and I, 3 hours ago, were going to a nice picnic in the park. Our kids are on spring break. We're going to go throw the Frisbee around. And we were talking about this episode, and she asked me that question. And I'm like, man, I don't know. But I'm going to try to make it entertaining when you do ask that question on the podcast.
Oh, I thought your answer was you did know.
Oh, okay. Well, so probably it was predicted by people smarter than me. But my first two inclinations that it was, Susanna, you're basically saying like, all right, before this year, did we know we were going to be limited by power? Or is it just the AI explosion that has driven that? Well, Sam Altman from OpenAI, roughly around the time that ChatGPT was starting to get rolled out in, I think, 2022, he made a big investment in an advanced reactor company called Oklo, OKLO. And he's like, we need nuclear. So he must have seen it coming. Yeah. And then shortly thereafter, Mark Zuckerberg went on the record saying that growth is going to be limited by electricity. He was thinking about AI at that point. So, those two people are much smarter than me. So I think they're probably thinking about it before.
Thanks, Susanna. So I was an electrical engineering major in college, and we were always talking about transistor size, because transistors kept getting smaller, and then semiconductor production, like Rob mentioned before, that was often the limiting factor. It was the ability, like, do you remember, I mean, probably, I don't know, 5 years ago, we were worried about chip production. There was even like money set aside to produce more chips. So like, I mean, and there's these NVIDIA chips but like these NVIDIA chips do as much as like, how many chips, Rob? Like 20, 100,
Yeah.
So like, I think we never thought that we weren't going to be limited more by hardware this quickly. We didn't think that somebody would figure out these the different processing units that you've said a bunch of times, Rob, and I can't remember what they are, but like,
yeah, graphics problem, GPUs,
yeah, GPUs, like in used in this way, like no one saw that, and it was kind of like an aha moment. And then now we're like, holy crap, we figured out how to process so much faster. We can do so much more. Oh wait, we're gonna need a lot more power.
Yeah, it's
Well, and there was one other moment that I remember. It was when Elon Musk briefly allowed Bitcoin to be used to do transactions to buy Tesla. And then, and so then there was a huge surge in investment in Bitcoin. But then the reason he backed out and said he didn't want to do that anymore is because it took too much energy
Yeah.
to do the transactions.
Yeah. No, it's no, I mean, I don't know. I never saw it coming about this quickly. I'll be honest.
Me neither. I mean, I think the stat that still boggles my mind is in the last 20, 30 years, electricity consumption in the United States has been flat. Even though our population has grown, the internet came about, it's just been flat. Maybe that's because we're not doing a lot of manufacturing in the US relative to, say, China, but I would only be speculating.
I know that within the last 10 years, our number one use of electricity had shifted for the first time ever since electricity was invented from lighting, like lighting your house, to refrigeration. So lighting forever and a day, maybe it was in the last 15 years, it went because to run a cooling, and refrigeration could be lots of things. It's air conditioning, it's not just making ice cubes in refrigerator. I wonder now, well, would it still be refrigeration if it's cooling data centers, Probably. Yeah. So
I know we've got lots more to cover, Rob, with all the great meetings that you've been in. You want to talk a bit about collaborations and some of the how does it wrap collaborations and partnerships?
Yeah, I'll highlight two of them. So, well, first I'll talk about this mass production in a factory concept. So this is also something advanced reactors want to do. They want to build most, if not all, of their reactors in a factory and then ship it. And one of the there's a lot of players in that space. Allo Atomics here in Austin is one of them. They want to build 50 a year within a few years. Excuse me. Another company on that panel, Allo was on the panel, but it's a company called Shepherd Power. And Shepherd Power is based in Houston. They came out of a oil and gas company called NOV. And their vision is to provide small modular reactors for and build the infrastructure around those for oil and gas. And so they caught my attention. This is at the South by Southwest event because it was a nuke named Tim Williamson, who was one of their executives, and he was talking about some of the challenges they're facing and their vision. And we're all up on this rooftop deck, and the sun was like, I'm getting cooked. Well, he showed up at the RIC 2 days later in DC, and both of us are just completely sunburnt. And I'm like, okay, that's probably Tim Williamson. I'm gonna go talk to him. But he was on the panel and was arguing for something called Project Hotshot. So Project Hotshot is even more aggressive than the Advance Act. It's a proposal with very detailed procedures behind it that shows how you can approve a reactor in 180 days. So that's 6 months. And they'd done an awful lot of work around it, basically showing that, like, if in advance you have the reactor shown to be safe and you can collect a lot of data publicly about the sites that you want to put it on, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to approve something 180 days for their specific use cases. So that was a neat panel discussion. And another suggestion from that panel, this is factory production. So if you're mass producing reactors, if you make 50 in a year, that you want to deploy them at probably 50 different sites, maybe 25 if you're doing like 2-packs. Well, it turns out that you have to do an environmental report analysis for each of those sites, and the Advance Act has to be done in 2 years. Well, the current regulation says you have to build a meteorological tower on your site and let it collect data for 2 years before you're done. So there were all sorts of arguments against that. I think that's been a point of contention for a long time. But NEI brought that, Nuclear Energy Institute, and they said, if you really want to prove these things in 2 years, you need to reconsider that because there's plenty of climate data. Anyway, I dodged your question, Sarah. I'll come back to it. Partnerships. So there's three major nuclear industry groups out there: the Nuclear Energy Institute, Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI, which is in North Carolina, and then INPO, Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, which is in Atlanta. They'll have somewhat similar, but not completely overlapping goals. They have collected scads of data from their membership over the last 3 decades that is not available to the public. So they are starting to build out some AI workloads on top of that. So the one that I heard of that I think has a lot of potential is a troubleshooting assistant. So, just pretend you're operating a nuclear power plant, something goes wrong. You've got a bunch of data from your sensors. You're trying to dig into what's happening. Well, you can only access the data from your plants to understand what's going on. But these three organizations, if they put all their data together, now you've got a much more general data collection or data set that can tell you a whole lot more about what's going on than just your kind of isolated plant. So that was there are a few presentations on that, and I think that's got a lot of legs to it, particularly because I'm into data science and I'm excited about that, and I think they'll do really well with it.
No, that's super cool. So most of the presentations you went to were at the RIC, and then the South by Southwest. That was the meeting on the roof was the main event there for the nuclear group there within South by Southwest. So which you said you attended an AI
Oh yeah.
at the RIC. Can you kind of tell us what the gist of that was?
Yeah. So there's so much interest in AI, both on the industry side and the regulator, that the NRC has put together maybe twice, 2 or 3 times a year, like a half-day symposium to feature people's work. And so it was like a lightning talk thing. You got 10 minutes. You can't pitch your product, but there were on the industry side, there were things like, okay, if you remember on the submarine, we would fill out paperwork if something, seemed to be broken or there's some kind of trouble or something like that. Well, we could generate dozens of those per day or over the course of deployment, maybe 100 or something like that. I don't remember what they're called, but at a nuclear reactor plant, it's like 100 plus per day. So someone built an AI model to basically receive all those as they come in and say, okay, is this something I need to pay attention to? And the example they gave was like, well, if someone's complaining about burnt hot dogs in the cafeteria, that's different than like a water leak outside of an important valve. And so that was an interesting use case, very focused, very like specific. But another thing that I noticed about Symposium was that there were competitors of mine there. So there's several other companies that are trying to use large language models to assist in the licensing process. And I got to chat with them, shake their hands, find out, what their specific angles were. And I took it as like a confirmation that I'm on the right track. because there's other people doing it too.
Was it like meeting one of Susanna's old boyfriends?
Oh yeah, I I made sure the meeting was outdoors and I had my shoes on. Um, yeah, they're all good people. Yeah, yeah. Those are the highlights. I have to give a shout out to John Graves, who's a former nuke, served with me and Mike in Kings Bay. He's gotten pretty high up at the NRC. He's in charge of one of the groups around advanced reactor licensing. And he's the one who kind of drove to make sure that there was like info on the website to guide newcomers through the licensing process. Um, and he had a few other tidbits like that.
I always like to talk about John and a couple of my other friends that work at the NRC because I kind of coach people's careers and I help them decide what they want to do when they grow up. And John's had a great career with the NRC, and it's provided a real nice work-life balance for his family. And John's no slouch of an engineer. He's a really good engineer, and he couldn't be working, but he chose staying and work for the government. And now with this nuclear revolution, we're super glad we have guys like John and glad that Brian Parks and some other
Totally.
that-
He is like kind of like us. He's like in the next generation of enthusiasts, professionals, but he's also young enough to remember a sense of urgency and realize that there's other technologies out there. So I think we're lucky to have people like him.
Yeah, no.
We could change the name of this podcast to the John Fan Club. So anything else, Rob, from your adventures in
Yeah.
nuclear meeting?
Yeah. Last one. So I mentioned there was this conference happening in parallel in Houston. Well, some of the executives, went to both. One of them was Maria Korsnick, who's the CEO of Nuclear Energy Institute, and she is rock solid. She's a person in the industry I have the utmost respect for. And she said that the tone and the enthusiasm around nuclear and the urgency around nuclear at this conference in Houston was, to use her word, warlike. Like we really need to get our stuff together and build. And we're not building right now. We're not building a single operational reactor in the United States right now. There's prototypes, there's things in development, but there's nothing licensed that's under construction. I guess the TerraPower unit is. But in countries that we compete with, like China, they're building AP1000 after AP1000. So it was, it was good TV to see her say like, hey, we need to be a little bit more warlike. Particularly because I think there's been a lot of like big announcements from the new administration around policy, but haven't seen big ones yet from the NRC just yet.
Our discussion about public-private partnership, we if we want to be warlike, if we want these things to get off the ground, and we know we need the private partnership, what is the upside for these companies that would get involved? Is the profit margin going to be worth it to them, and how do they?
I mean, the reactors should last 50 to 100 years.
Yeah.
And
I
they're
mean,
just,
I don't know how, the big energy companies make money, but they make money, whether it's natural gas, whether it's coal, oil, whatever. So it'd be the same model. It would be like Rob's saying, it would be a longer, you don't build a reactor, sell it, and, like real estate, you ride it out. I mean, it could end up being a safe investment because it's like steady.
it's very long. And so, yes, there's going to be profit to be shared. And then for some buyers of reactors, you can, you now have a new asset that you can depreciate against your other income. So there's significant tax advantages in the short term, which don't even take into account the long-term profits and lower costs.
And the thing is, Susanna, uh, these data center companies, they they need power from somewhere, and because if they don't build their data centers, they're not making money. If AWS and Microsoft aren't have the ability to host these data centers with NVIDIA chips and whatever, they're losing money. So just they're thinking that this is just cost of doing business. So the hyperscalers are. So
Yeah. Yeah. So that's it. This is great week. I was honored to be there. Next couple months will be exciting. So you better stay tuned to the Nukes of Hazard podcast.
That sense of urgency, I think, really hits home, right? Like there is a sense of urgency to get moving,
Yeah.
innovate, try all these different options. It's really cool to hear about different collaborations and funding sources and people coming together. So thanks for giving us a recap of what's new in nuclear.
You bet. You bet.
And Michael, sounds like you are going out of town next week. You want to tell us where you're headed and what you're doing?
yeah, no, not as deeply intellectual as Rob's trip to DC, but
Highly impactful.
yeah. So
It's gonna be better.
I think some of the people that tune in here are going to be people that know that I help Navy nukes with their career stuff, and what I try to do every year is visit every place that nukes are stationed at. What the obvious ones are the submarine bases or the carrier bases, the nuclear power school in Charleston, the nuclear prototype in Charleston, nuclear prototype in Saratoga Springs. I try to visit the Strategic Command in Omaha each year because that's where a lot of our nukes that speak nuclear weapons end up going. And then I try every other year to get to the submarine watch floor in Naples and the submarine watch floor in Yokosuka, Japan, which also has a carrier that is stationed there. So Yokosuka, while far, is you have the carrier when the carrier is in port, and then also the submarine watch floor there. So for the nukes that need career advice. So, but
We're proud of you. We're thankful we're doing it. I was
yeah.
with some guys who just love the NUPOC community. And
No, but yeah. So Sarah will be a bachelorette for. So if you see any strange cars here, just let me know.
we got the cameras set up.
Yeah, she needs more males in her life.
I don't think it's it's not a problem when she's there. It's probably more like when she's gone. That's when would hadrons happen.
More likely.
On that note, all right, y'all. This has been another episode of Nukes of Hazard. Great chatting with you today. Looking forward to seeing everybody in the next episode.